Hello, folks, and thanks for showing up today. Um, if you are here, then you are either in one of my classes or my classes should know that as I posted to you, I'm making this presentation public. So I put out a call on Facebook. So looks like there's only a handful of people here, but this could be almost anyone that is watching us today. So where this presentation came from is I had a student in one of my classes this semester ask, "Hey, would you show us your work?" And I had shown them a few of my things as part of examples for what they were working on. Um, and truth be told, in most upper level classes, I schedule in a day where I'm going to show my work. And most uh, uh, most semesters, it gets edited out. I always have it toward the end of the semester, and usually something comes up that we just don't have time for it. Students are behind, or there's been a snow day, or something happened, and so we end up editing it out of the semester. Um, and so this semester, I didn't even schedule it because of all the issues with COVID. I didn't even schedule it. So when a student asked if I would do it, I did schedule in a couple of flex days. So here we are at the very last day of the fall semester. I said, sure, I'll show some work. Um, Now, if you got my invite to this today, this is totally unrehearsed. This is probably one of the most unprofessional presentations I have ever given. I put together some slides. I have not even looked through the slides. Um, you know, I put them in an order that I knew I was going to say some things. It is roughly chronological. Um, and I'm going to start from the beginning. So um, I have no idea, since I haven't rehearsed this, I have no idea how long this is going to take. I could breeze through these slides in 22 minutes, or it could be 2 hours from now. I suspect it's going to be somewhere in between there. My goal, my unrehearsed goal, is about an hour or so. Um, but you can post comments, and I invite you at any time to post a question or discuss things amongst yourselves there. So if you have any questions about anything as I'm going, please go ahead and ask in the comments. Just keep in mind that you're about 10 seconds behind where I'm talking, so I won't get your questions right away, but I'll keep an eye on the comments and get to them when I can. So, all right, so here we go. And I titled this, just sort of off the top of my head, "Some Things I've Made," because that sort of encapsulates the attitude that I'm taking to this presentation. It has been a long semester. My students know that. And both my classes, we all made it. I'm really proud of both of those classes um, for making it to the end here and successfully. I feel that way about myself. It has been a long way to get here. Uh, um, so now we can just kind of have some fun. I'm going to tell some stories about sort of my creative trajectory and how I have thought about things over many years. Um, Obviously, it's going to be condensed down quite a bit. So first, I'm starting from the very beginning. Um, um, I didn't draw a lot as a kid. Um, I figure I drew probably the normal amount for a kid, but it wasn't like, like something I did all the time. And when I started getting into art, which was a little bit later in life, I had these friends who would talk about just drawing incessantly when they were a child. And when I was first in school for art, and then even later, as I was starting my career, I sort of felt like maybe I was a poser or something. Maybe I didn't really belong in this. I wasn't one of those people that drew all the time. And as you start getting older, I started thinking more about my childhood and what did I do. And I realized I just make things. I didn't necessarily draw. Um, so one of the things I liked to make was plastic models. Um, the old plastic models. Most of the things I made were like World War II era sort of tanks and planes and stuff like that. I loved making these things. Um, I wasn't particularly good at it. Mine had a little glue smears on them. I wasn't super meticulous. I remember I wasn't great at it, but I enjoyed it, and that was enough for me. Um, I also love to play with these guys. Um, I'm sure some of you, my son recently got some of these from school, and he just loves them. They're just the plain old little 2-inch plastic army guys. I had, dozens and dozens of these and would set them up in little dioramas, probably just like any other kid, setting up little battle scenes over the couch and chairs and things like that. Now, one of the things that I did with these was after I made my plastic models and they sat around for a while, I got bored with them. And so I took my BB gun and I'd take them out in the yard and I'd shoot them up. Um, I'd kind of play war. Hey, I'm back. Somebody shoot a comment out there and see if I'm still here. I'm working on getting us back in line here. It says I am still, um, okay, good. It says I'm still connected. Now I'm seeing it. All right, great. Thank you. Sorry for that interruption. Hopefully that won't happen again. I hope. All right. Um, so I used to shoot these um, models and break them up, and I would, eventually the BB gun wasn't strong enough, so I would crack them and just break them and create these like destructive war scenes, which were what little kids do. I was probably somewhere in the 7 to 10-year-old range. And so where the Army guys came in was somewhere I figured out or had seen, I don't remember where I saw it, was I would take these Army men and I took a shoebox and I would take my broken models and I would glue them down and make a little war scene diorama out of it. Um, I even, got to the point where I would take, little sewing pins and a cigarette lighter and heat up the sewing pin, and I would put bullet holes in the sides of my model airplanes, and I would paint little smoke around, and fire coming off of the bullet holes. And I would take my Army men and I would like chop off an arm and and sort of burn them a little bit and then paint blood around them. And then I would glue them all into the shoebox and create this sort of war disaster scene. I don't remember ever seeing anything like that. It just sort of seemed like something to do. So I would make these things. These pictures are not mine. These are just some things I found, on the internet. But people do this sort of thing. I would glue some dirt in there and put some rocks in there with it. So I made lots of those kind of dioramas. Another thing that I did that I made a lot of was I lived next to a Tandy leather company store. And does anybody remember those Tandy leather company stores? They were in little strip malls. I think they were really big in the 70s and some of the 80s. I loved hanging out there. I loved the smell of that store. They had all kinds of, it was a very small little store. Well, I got a leather tooling set for Christmas or birthday or something. I asked for it. I wanted it. And you can see some of the tools down there in these boxes. And I would tool leather. I never made anything great or even all that interesting, but that pounding of the tools and the leather and saving up my money and going to buy a new tool was super exciting. And I always, I could only really afford like scrap leather, and they would sell these little scrap leather piles, and I would go buy those and tool those things. Another thing that I made when I was I don't know, somewhere around 11 or 12 years old, I broke my leg. And it was a pretty severe break, so I was laid up for quite a while, and my mom had to hire someone to kind of come in and check on me when I was home in a cast. And this woman was really kind, and she taught me how to crochet. And I wasn't very good at it. And so if you've ever crocheted and you're not very good at it, and you don't keep the tension even, it starts to curl up and you make bookworms. That was about the only thing I could make was bookworms. And I made bookworms very similar to these. And I put the googly eyes on them, one after the other. And I just thought that was, that was a cool thing to do. And again, I wasn't very good at it. So I made things. I always made things. When I went to high school, I didn't really make anything until I think like junior year of high school. I got interested in photography. I don't even know. I think my dad might have bought me a camera, and the chemistry teacher at my high school taught me how to develop film and print black and white photos. I think it was all of about 20 minutes of instruction. So it was not, it wasn't high level anything. It was just a chemical storage room and for the dark room. And he turned me loose. And I was the only kid in school who was kind of interested in it. So I sort of had this space to myself. So I became the photographer for the yearbook and the newspaper for school. And so all of these things that I did, I never, ever associated the word art with it. It just wasn't part of what I was doing. Um, Photography was me getting to hang out with my friends, take pictures of them, and get them in the yearbook or the newspaper. Um, when I went to college, like I suspect a lot of people, um, my reason for going to college was because my father informed me I was going to college, and I thought, well, I don't really have anything else to do. I might as well go to college. Um, I thought, well, maybe I'll be a photojournalist. I thought that would be a cool thing to do. Um, and so we didn't have photojournalism. That's especially back in the mid 80s. There weren't many schools that offered photojournalism. In fact, there were only 5 in the country, and none of them were in Wisconsin, which is where I lived. So I thought I would become a journalism major. I think there were all of 2 photography classes for the journalism major at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where I went to school. Well, I took, let's see, I couldn't take that until I was like a junior in the journalism program, and I saw art had a photography class. So I thought I'd take that. But in a large university like that, you can't just go take photography like we can at Northland. You had to take 2 semesters of drawing and 2 semesters of design, 2D design and 3D design, before you could take anything like photography or printmaking. I fully admit I didn't know how things worked. I was pretty naive. I just thought, well, drawing seems kind of cool. I guess they'll teach me how to do it, and I'll just do it. And I thought maybe I'll even minor in art if I have to take all these art classes. So I started taking the art classes, and I absolutely loved it. That was the thing. I was like hooked. So it wasn't even until I was a second year in college that I started taking art classes. Never took art classes in high school or anything before. And this slide shows the first woodcut that I ever made. I still have this print. In fact, I don't think I had ever taken a photograph of it until this morning. I didn't even know I still had this thing. And also, this is one of the first etchings that I ever made on here. So very quickly, printmaking became the thing that I wanted to do. There was something about that physicality and that process. If you think about, or if I think about all the things that I did and made when I was a kid, it was really the process of making those things that I loved. And printmaking was kind of the same way. It was just about, it was all this process that you had to go through. It wasn't drawing necessarily, it was just making things. And that's how I've always sort of thought about this, as just making things. And I still remember when I was printing this woodcut, and this was, decades ago now, I was printing this woodcut, and there were some grad students in the studio talking. And I was just like a little undergrad. I was sort of embarrassed to even be there. I was embarrassed for them to even see this woodcut, which I did not think much of at all. I'd never done one before, and I just hacked away at the wood and printed it up. And one of the graduate students looked over at what I was doing, and he gave me a genuine compliment on it. And I think even for about 2 weeks, I thought he was kidding. I thought he was actually being sarcastic. But he was being sincere about that. And so, I don't know, that has obviously stuck with me for decades, that maybe I can do this. So I'm just going to go through a few of my undergraduate pieces here. Where ideas come from. That first one, there was no idea. I was just making stuff. This is actually an illustration from a dream that I had. And it was also part of a an assignment that we were supposed to use an image from another person's artwork. So the Queen image there on the left is from another person's artwork. It's from Warrington Colescott's, one of his prints. But this was from a dream that I had. Um, this was something I know if any of my students are out there, they've heard this before. I didn't have a lot of ideas, and since I didn't grow up drawing, and I didn't have classes or anything. I didn't really know how to generate ideas. I came up with an idea that I saw somewhere. I saw it and I just sort of took it and made it my own. Was this idea of a skeleton being part of a tree? And I had fledgling environmentalist ideas. They weren't informed by anything other than just my feeling that trees are cool, the environment's cool. That's really all it was. But I took this little kernel of an idea and I just kept repeating it. And I thought I was cheating. I had even stolen the original idea. But I knew enough to make it mine some way, but I still felt like I was cheating. So the first one on the left there is a linoleum cut, and one of the problems with showing anything digitally is scale gets really screwed up. So from left to right, the scale is 2 feet, 3 feet, 5 feet. So these are vastly different sized things. So this idea, I just kept repeating, and I thought I was getting away with it. Well, it turns out that's called thematic development, and it's actually highly desirable. I had no idea. I thought I was just cheating and getting away with stuff. And so I had this environmental theme running through a lot of my work. Other places that I got ideas that I thought I was cheating. This is a woodcut that was a self-portrait from a photograph that I had taken for another class, and this was only a portion of that photograph. This was from my art photography class that I finally got to take. I thought I was cheating because I was taking something I had done in one class and translating it into another. Turns out that's what you're supposed to do. I had no idea. There was nobody teaching me these things. Even though I went to UW-Madison, it's a very well-respected art school, and especially in the printmaking area. When they say schools are well-respected like that, they generally mean the graduate program, not the undergraduate program. They didn't really spend much time with us. We were shown some techniques and sort of left to our own devices, and really got very minimal feedback. So I thought I was cheating this whole time. And this is sort of showing, I didn't feel like I had a lot of ideas. By this time, I was keeping a sketchbook because we pretty much had to. And I used to draw these weird cartoon birds in it all the time. I have no idea why. And I needed an idea for a new woodcut. So I created this bar scene. I like to go into bars. And so I stuck the birds in there. And it turned out to be a very ambitious 5-color reduction woodcut that I still show my classes for reduction today. But, ideas can come from anywhere. There was just some junk in my sketchbook that I'd sort of stuck together and ran with. This is a 5 by 3 foot woodcut that was sort of I guess start of my more political aware art. This was based on the protest to a film in the 1990s, or I'm sorry, the late 1980s. What was that? It was Last Temptation of Christ. Every day I had to walk by protesters for this film, protesting this film. And then eventually I walked by protesters protesting the protesters. And I don't know, I think to this day I've never seen the film. This image was about the protesting. So it's got this demonic preacher guy with this film, literally the film strips with forked tongues. I thought it was, at this time, I didn't really have much media understanding, and I thought it was funny that they thought that this film could be so terrible, so evil. Anyway, I like showing these because of the scale that I was working at. The friends that I had at this time, it's like we were just like pushing each other to go bigger and bigger and bigger. So this is this is 5-foot piece of wood. So it's a lot of cutting. This is the very last print I made in undergraduate school, and it's called the graduation print. It's not one of my more ambitious prints. It's a linoleum cut, but it really expressed that idea of getting out of school. So there's these little graduation caps, you fling in the air that are all flying up above. And there's this, what looks, what I tried to create was a bunch of tools that look almost like a angry mob with pitchforks and shovels and axes. But those are also implements of manual labor. So this was like my fear of like, what the hell is next? What am I gonna do now? Well, the answer was more school. So I went to grad school. So between graduating, I graduated in December, and I started grad school the next fall. I didn't make a thing, not a darn thing. So I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of grad school stuff. I think my undergraduate story is more interesting for a general public. The grad school stuff, just the stories are really, they're so grad school oriented, as anybody who's ever gone. If you're out there, it's so concentrated and so focused. So there was about 1.5 to 2 years of a bunch of weird stuff being made. And then I'm going to show you just a few pieces from my thesis show. This is where, as grad school should, it started focusing me on really more mature ways of creating ideas. So ideas coming from reading, coming from different ideas that I had read of thinkers and pop culture, and different ways of bringing these things together in a more intentional way that I was never taught in undergraduate school. So these are, I won't go into a whole lot of detail about them. These sort of weave together environmental themes and themes of male privilege and reaction to learning what feminism really is, and how I had thought about these things before, because I was just an ignorant kid. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't understand my own privilege. I didn't understand anything. So it was really a political awakening during grad school to kind of understand some of these things. So I use this cowboy figure as sort of the classic lone cowboy, and he's always sort of tied to this dying landscape, unconnected, unfeeling. Here the cowboy's even been turned into a domesticated as a lamp. And there were dozens of these prints, but we'll kind of leave that there. So then you get out of grad school. Now, one thing about those prints, this was the early 90s. This was really pre Photoshop as we know it. So when you're looking at these kinds of things, this is all film. These are 22 by 30 inch photo lithographs. And these are all made with film that is this large. So all the photographs are mine, developed as 35 millimeter, and then blown up on what's called a process camera, which is excuse me, which is a camera that takes up 2 rooms. And made into larger sheets of film. This was it was already quickly becoming an antiquated way that graphic designers worked for production. Um, so my point is, and then they had to be turned into a photolitho plate and then hand printed. So the process involved in this was deep and thick. Um, and that at that time, that was a huge allure of them because there was no other way to get this sort of thing. To us today, it's not much to this. I could Photoshop all this garbage, take digital photographs, and I mean, it wouldn't take much time at all. I could whip through this if I had these ideas. It wasn't so back then. It took hours and hours and hours and hours to get something like this. Whether it's any good or not, that's a different question. So I continued that sort of methodology, sort of that at least visual way of working, but with collage. I was out of school. I didn't have access to all that fancy dancy equipment anymore, but I did have access to some different kind of equipment. I started working at a small company that had some high-tech printing equipment. Some of the first production color copiers. And we had special software that turned that copier into a scanner. Now, there were scanners before, and there were copiers, but interfacing those two was challenging in the early 90s. So having access to this gave me a whole bunch of new possibilities and a whole bunch of new stuff to learn. So these are all like very physical collages with color copies and magazine cutouts and tape and drawing and all kinds of stuff on there. Found images and things made on my own that sort of deal with some of these same themes of maleness and femaleness and this sort of relationship idea. I loved this gold trophy businessman. So he makes an appearance in a lot of things. Now I'm getting into using digital stuff again. This is very early Photoshop days. I think we were only on like version 2 or something. So I was scanning my collages and drawing parts and putting them into Photoshop and creating these digital collages. Again, now these things, they don't have a whole lot of resonance. But back in the early 90s, early mid 90s, this was kind of, you didn't see this kind of stuff. And I was printing these on artists' rag paper. And so this was unheard of. Now, you can send stuff off, you can get it printed on canvas, and you can get it printed on a dozen different types of art paper with texture, without texture, yada, yada, yada. Again, not the case. Decades ago. The place I was working, we were doing high-tech color printing, color transfer printing onto t-shirts. And so the guy that I was working with, he developed a way to put t-shirt transfers onto rag paper. So that's what these were. I loved showing these at that time to people, whether they liked the images or not. They were sort of blown away by the process. When you're showing it to artists, like, how did you get this onto this paper? It just wasn't heard of. So that was kind of fun to be involved with that. And I really started learning my Photoshop skills. And I loved combining, drawings and paintings and collages, scan them in, do digital work on them, print them out, and I would do more digital or more analog physical work on top of that. So it went back and forth from analog to digital to back, usually multiple times. So during this time, I'm also getting heavily involved in photography, specifically Polaroids. So as I'm learning this brand new bleeding edge technology, I'm also going back and getting old technology in the form of Polaroids. I ended up collecting at thrift stores, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 different types of Polaroid cameras. My good buddy and studio mate at the time, we would go to flea markets and find old, out-of-date Polaroid film because that stuff was expensive and we were poor. Um, so I did a lot of Polaroid photography. I really liked the immediacy of Polaroids. Um, it was still that technology involved, but it happened. Once you had to take that picture, then there was no developing. I also, I don't have any of them to show you, but I was doing a lot of Polaroid transfers of different sorts. There are all kinds of different things you can do with Polaroids other than just take the picture. For some reason, I don't have any pictures of those things. So these are all from different types of Polaroids, from SX70 to the land cameras, from different types of film. Here, this is one of my favorite ones because if you look at the table down the lower part of there, those are all Polaroids laying there. And I'm with two friends of mine who we both had cameras and film, and this is one of the things we would do. We would always have our cameras with us, and we would just always be taking pictures. And it looks like all three of it. You can see my beer glass in the center there, and the bottom, and my two friends have got their beer glass too. So lots of Polaroids, lots and lots. I still have boxes of these things. Again, here, look at the right-hand side of this picture. You see a bunch of Polaroids on the table. We were always taking Polaroids. And doing kind of tricky business with them in different ways, such as this one. All right, then there's this series of, these are digital collages made from photographs that I took. And this is sort of a lot of the thoughts and process behind this series of images is not evident in the images, but they are important to me as the maker. So this is one of the only times that I've had an idea that was fully formed. I had a flash of what I wanted to make, of what I wanted it to look like, and these are it. These are exactly it. Now, how I got there, though, I had to learn new skills. I had to learn a lot of new skills. I had to learn a lot of digital skills, and I had to learn a lot of people skills. So I do want to take a second to describe this process. I do not consider myself a photographer, like a portrait photographer. I recognize that there's a skill to that. And I didn't have it. How to get someone to look how I wanted them to look. The Polaroids were all very spontaneous and candid. I didn't want that with this. I wanted a specific look. And I knew I didn't know how to do that. So I created a system that would allow me to get a model that would give me that look. So what I mean is, at this point, I had tons of art friends. I could ask any number of them, hey, would you model for me? They would love to. It would be no problem at all. I would have more models than I needed. But I knew I couldn't direct them. So what I did is I created a flyer that photographer looking for female models, absolutely no nudity, but must be willing to smoke a cigar. That was the whole ad said. that was carefully designed to not tell them who I was. I didn't give them my name because I didn't want people I knew. Um, uh, uh, I didn't tell them anything else other than, just no nudity, but you got to be willing to smoke a cigar. So it was this very uh, mysterious ad. I knew, at least I guessed, I designed into the process that I'm going to get people who are pretty darn confident of themselves, who are going to answer an ad like that. I didn't mention getting paid, anything. And it worked absolutely perfect. I got the exact models that I needed, people who were very confident in themselves, and I did pay them, and it worked out great. One of the kind of funny things is I. I was living in a small little house on the top of a hill on a dead end street, and these women would call me, and we would talk about, I would tell them what my project was, and I would tell them I'm going to pay them, and I would tell them all the stuff. And the first one showed up with a carload of dudes, and it immediately hit me. It's like, oh, this probably looks really creepy and sketchy. And I didn't think that part because I was so focused on the art of it. So after that, and then I got the dudes comfortable. I even had my portfolio out because I wanted to show the models. I was, a serious artist. I wasn't just some creepy dude. Even, wanting them to come in my basement and smoke cigars. So it was a real learning experience. And as the process went on, and as these models came, I really came to see this as a whole conceptual performance of us kind of getting to know each other, and this relationship was developed in this time, and it was really interesting. And I still really like those pieces. So also at the same time, my digital skills are increasing. I'm also starting to do more graphic design oriented stuff. And this was a T-shirt design that I did for the University of Michigan Museum of Art. For a Monet exhibit that they were having. If you know anything about Monet, most of his work is super colorful, and all that stuff is wonderful. Well, the Monet that they own was this kind of drab monochrome thing, but it's called the Turning Point because this is where his signature style was being created. So I took this as an opportunity to learn another new skill. So, and I apologize for the not so greatness of these photographs. But the text that runs in the column on the left-hand side is an excerpt from a letter that he wrote at the time, and it's talking about his despair of his creativity, not thinking he's ever going to do anything or make anything or figure anything out. So I used his Monet's signature on many different of his paintings, and if you look at the letters for Claude Monet, there's a lot of letters in there. So I created a font based on his own painted signatures. So that still remains the only font that I have ever created. So here's some other graphic design projects that I started doing. I teamed up with a local photographer, and he was marketing himself toward bands. So he did the photography, and I did the design work, and we worked together to create full CD packages, and we would get their CDs burned and packaged for them. So you remember when CD packaging was a big deal. So these were a lot of fun to work on. Again, learning new skills left and right. I sort of taught myself graphic design. The art skills and the tech skills are super helpful, but there's a lot to graphic design that is different. So a couple of these won some local design awards. Each one, one of the things to notice is these look very different because they fit the music that they go with. We would challenge ourselves to see how intricate we could actually get with these things, even designing, the CD itself. Here's a couple of logos that I did, variations on a logo. Couple of letterhead, stationery sets, logos, business card. I did the whole thing from the ground up. And here's another one that I did. All right. And now is sort of a break. So I had developed all these digital skills. I was doing a lot of graphic design. I was teaching graphic design at this point, and I was teaching art also. I was an adjunct, so I was teaching both of the classes in both of these. And I'd been doing this for a number of years, doing the photography, doing the digital collages, doing the graphic design. And frankly, I was kind of tired. I wasn't making a lot of money by any means. And I decided I needed to pick one. I needed to pick either art or design and go with it for a while and see what that was like. So I was up for a job that was starting a new multimedia program at a school. So it was ripe for that sort of thing. And long story short, the job was actually defunded right before I was going to get hired for that job. Excuse me. And the department head felt so bad about that situation because I'd gone through the interview process. Anyway, he knew I was living in Tennessee at this time, just a preface. He knew I had some ties in Wisconsin, and he had a job description for Wisconsin. Now, it was a crazy job description. It was at a small college in northern Wisconsin, not Northland. And they basically needed somebody to do all the 2D art. So I thought, all right, if I can't get this job, at this place, then that sort of makes my decision that maybe I'll go do graphic design for a while, because I was right on the verge. I was like next in line to be hired at a couple of different graphic design firms. I'd doing a lot of freelance stuff. So I knew that would come eventually. Anyway, I got that job and I totally switched gears. No more digital stuff. I didn't have access to a lot of digital equipment anymore. All the high-tech stuff was gone. I was living out in the dang woods in Wisconsin, so I pulled out my charcoal and started drawing. I don't have a lot of those drawings. This is just one representative. This was a fall sunflower in my front yard. I did a lot of drawings of poppy pods, of which here are just a couple. I did a bunch of these. So I went totally retro back to fine art skills, no technology kind of stuff. And here's another one from that sort of series. So these were very, I was observational. I was sort of stuck in that mode of observational. And then this happened. Like a lot of my students over many years, they see abstract art and they go, oh, well, shoot, I could do that. And I did the same thing when I was, younger. I would say, well, that person's famous, that sells. What what? That doesn't look like anything. And and then I would try it, and it felt wrong, and it didn't look good. And so I learned, it's like that abstract stuff is it has a path, it has a meaning, it has a way, and I'm not it. And one day I got mad at what I was making, and I just sort of freaked out on this piece of paper, and I liked what I saw. I felt what I saw. And it wasn't the same before. If I did it without intention, without, for lack of a better word, without feeling, it didn't make sense. And this one made sense. And I really liked that. So I developed a methodology for making this long series of abstract drawings. These are all made, these are abstractions of seeds and seed pods and winter scenes in the woods, because this is where I had access to all this stuff living in Wisconsin now. This was a product of my environment. And I would start these drawings with just a single line, and I would just build up the marks one after the other. I would have my seed pod collection around, but I wasn't trying to copy anything in particular. Here's 3 etchings that I did based on the same ideas. I would just sort of keep going until I decided to stop. Sometimes they would be completely erased, and that was an important part of my process. Was I didn't just start over if I felt like it wasn't going well. I would start erasing until it started going better, and then I would start drawing again. So that idea of the process leads to something more interesting than having a clear conception in my head and then trying to execute it. For me, having that clear conception oftentimes was not that interesting. My conception would be informed by my physical reality of making these things. So these ideas translated into etchings, also translated into woodcuts, such as this one. There are lots and lots and lots of these. Here's a combination of an intaglio and a monoprinting, just combining all kinds of processes with this idea. This is an etching, another etching. And then occasionally other things would happen, such as this. This is a series of encaustic paintings. Encaustic is just pigment mixed with wax or paraffin, usually some kind of combination of those things. I did a bunch of these similar imagery, but working with this encaustic idea. And then occasionally other things would just happen. Again, you know, if there's a theme to any of this, is I just make things. This is a bunch of fish decoys. These are I have a fish decoy collection of, of real fish decoys and some more folk art fish decoys, and I decided I was going to make folk art decoys. So these are all sticks found on Lake Superior. I don't carve the wood at all. I just find the fish in the stick, and then I add the fins in copper and paint them. So this is just like one of those, it's just sort of a fun thing that I decided to start doing. One of the habits that and ways of thinking that I learned in graduate school was that you should have a theme and you should work on only that. Now, all the things that I've ever made, I made multiples of them. All my ideas, I had multiples of them. But I would jump to a new idea and then jump to another idea. Here's a few more of these. The abstract line drawings started getting a little bit more abstract. I liked that you could see every mark in these drawings. There's no mystery as to how the drawing was made. You see every single mark. Oh, I meant to take this one out. This is just another one in that series. And then I finally got rid of the seed pods altogether and just became about the marks themselves and lining up one mark after another. So these drawings are made starting in the center, at least these two, and trying to draw a mark as straight and as slow as I can. So all these marks are drawn very, very slowly. The next mark, I follow the mark before it. And because, we are all imperfect, the mark starts to waver. And as the mark wavers, I have to keep going with that waver until it becomes something else. So if there's a theme to all the madness of the things that I've done, it's this love of process and physicality. Even in my digital work, there's a physicality to it. There's a woodcut kind of doing the same thing. I just got rid of all the imagery whatsoever, and it just became about the marks. It's just about making one cut at a time. These, especially these last several where the imagery is gone, they also start to become about meditation. There's nothing really difficult about making something like this. There's no skill to learn. I even, especially in these, I got rid of all the skill. So making these, the discipline it takes to make that mark slowly and just pay attention to that point of where the charcoal pencil is in connection with the paper became a type of meditation, right? Or what I referred to as a visual meditation. And eventually some imagery starts coming back in, and I did this, I'm still working on this series of murmuration images. These are etchings, but making the little dots, just like pointillism. It's a technique often taught in beginning drawing classes. One dot at a time, just seeing that one little mark at a time, and letting those build up to become something more than just the sum of a bunch of dots. Again, the same idea that you can see every dot. There's no mystery here, but to try to create something compelling that has no mystery in its production, I find really intriguing. Every mark is just obvious. And there are probably dozens of different experiments that did not make it today, but just here's one that I really like. This was melted snow. These are each 22 by 30, I think. And I started with a big ball of snow from my yard and let it melt on a slight incline to see what the results would be. Again, thinking about process and nature in different ways. And then, again, things would just happen. I got invited to do the Apple Festival poster a couple of years ago. I took it as an opportunity to pull something out of my sketchbook. My sketchbooks have tons of stuff, tons of ideas in it. And I had this idea to do woodcuts with multiple layers like this, multiple pieces of wood. Not thinking about a woodcut and then cutting it, but letting it sort of build up organically on its own. So I used this poster to kind of figure that out for myself, and then made a series of my own prints based on what I learned from doing that. So these aren't planned. I just have, 10 or 20 different pieces of paper, and I get out a color. I have lots of these wood pieces, and I just sort of look at it and print a bunch with whatever color that is, get another stick, ink it up, and keep going. So they have a similar methodology to all the lines. And some plants started making their way in it. So this is actually printing the plants. I'm not drawing this at all. There's a couple of others. I put these in here because these were a couple that were in an exhibition in Japan last year that I was really proud to be part of. Again, more plants making their way in there. And then an idea that I had had for a long time started to take shape, and that was printing cross sections of trees. So this might seem like a radical shift from everything, but I still see these as having a lot to do with this idea of meditation. You see the tree rings in here, and learning about the seed pod drawings were a lot about learning about those seeds, and these are a lot about learning about the trees and the vast differences that different trees have in their rings. So this is a series that is still ongoing. All the wood that I use for this is found or gifted to me. It's quite a process to get that cross section flat enough to print. And then here's another thing that just popped out. That idea of sticking with one idea and only doing that idea is something that I carried with me a long time from my grad school days, and I eventually shook it off. And now I allow myself to just make whatever I want, and that actually comes back and informs things that I've been working on for a while, and makes them new. So these are some wild little animals that I made. And then a couple of years ago, I started making lumens. It started with my idea that I wanted to document all of the plants in my yard. My wife grows all kinds of awesome plants and flowers. And I thought, well, first I would, make little drawings of each one of them, and I never got up the muster to do that. And so then I out of memory, I pulled this idea of making lumens. These are done on old, outdated photo paper, and taking the actual plant material and sandwiching it with the photo paper and a piece of glass and leaving it out in the sun. So what you see is what the actual photo paper looks like after it's been sitting in the sun for somewhere between 1 and 4 hours. I don't do anything else to it except scan it, and digitize it, and I do a little dust touch up. That's about it. But here you can see the dirt still on the root of the dandelion. And I'm still making like oodles of these things. Last summer and this summer, I made some early this summer, but I didn't have much time. All right, I mean, we could spend another hour just looking and talking about lumens. So I put in these two. These are from way back, some years back. Another thing that I used to consider myself like something was wrong with my my creative output was that I had no style, I did bodies of work that lasted years, but then I would do something else, or one of these other weird things would come squirting out. I never saw other artists doing this. I fully, I am aware and I embrace the, um, um, uh, I guess we call it just the privilege I have to have a job where I don't need to make money off of my artwork. I'm free to explore whatever I want to explore. Now, even though I was taught that I shouldn't be doing that, when I finally decided that I would shake that, as I said, and embrace it, my work to me became much more rich. So these are two prints that I did for two different exchange portfolios. Just briefly, an exchange portfolio is what printmakers do. They come up with a theme and a size and invite a bunch of printmakers, and everybody makes an edition. That's the number of the people that are in it. Everybody gets a set of all the images. Well, every time I got a theme, I approached it almost like a graphic designer. And I mean, a very, personal graphic designer, and I would embrace that theme. I didn't feel like whatever style I was working on, whatever series I was working on at the time, should be just crammed into the theme. I did something new, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Um, um, and I noticed the quote unquote more successful artists, they would just do whatever theme, whatever series that they work on, they would just do another one and stick it in with the portfolio. And I just, to me, that just sort of left it's like, geez, you didn't even really like give it any thought. So I have now embraced my um, way of handling these things, and I really am not that concerned about being on a specific style. All right, we're coming into the end here. Um, in that in that vein, I have for a few years I've done a Krampus image every year. And I hope to continue this tradition. And you can see the different ways that I handle the imagery, and just these Krampus images we'll look at. This was the first one. This was a demo for a screen printing class. So this is all done with screen printing and drawing. And this was last year's Krampus. This was an etching that I did. And a couple of years before this was a lithograph that I did. I tried to make this look like a traditional 19th century illustration. So you can just see, and here's this year's. This is another etching. So you can see, and this one's not complete yet. I've got a little more work to do on it. But you can see that looks like 4 different artists, and that's usually considered a liability. I don't care anymore. I really like it. Just a couple of more here. Any of you art history buffs would know this image. Merritt Oppenheim, her fur cup, which she titled Object. Super famous 20th century piece of artwork. If you've had any 20th century art history, I'm sure you saw this cup. Well, so now we're into COVID times, and how do you respond to something like that? And I thought about Merritt's cup, and it's covered with fur, so it's sort of repulsive. It's sort of useless. It's now an object. And I made this fur mask back in, boy, I think it was like April or something. I really haven't had time to make artwork for a variety of reasons. dealing with COVID and my job. But I really liked my fur mask, and now that it's winter, it'd probably be pretty helpful there. I think my wife said, "What is that, N950?" Because it's pretty thick. It's fake fur. And here toward at the end, just a couple of weeks ago, I took some drawings from my 6-year-old son and made a reduction linoleum cut as a demonstration for my class. So I really like doing projects with him and seeing how we can, he was the artist and I was just the cutter and printer, and came up with some colors for him. We've got another collaborative piece that we have worked on recently, and that's this little Krampus ornament made out of felt. He does the cutting out of the pieces, and I do the sewing. So our skills really complement each other. I'm not a good sewer, and he's 6, so his cutting is, maybe not as straight as it could be, but it adds a lot of charm to it, as I hope my poor sewing does. So we're making a bunch of these. And let's see, I think that gets us at the end here. Where was that? Yeah, that's the end. So there's a little over an hour overview of sort of a retrospective of a whole bunch of crazy stuff that I've done, and I assure you, I've left out a lot of failed things, and probably showed you a few failed things as well. So thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking this whole thing out. And if you've got any questions or anything, feel free to add them in the chat there. I appreciate all the comments. Glad to see some family out there. And Ty, that's awesome. Jana, good to see you too. Marcia. All right, got a question here from the well-known Orchid Muse. Let's see. I'm interested in the progression from representational art to more abstract art. Is this a thing a lot of artists do? Well, I mean, art history gives us a number of artists who have done that. And again, if you've studied 20th century art history, any of you out there, then you've heard of, even if you haven't studied it, you've heard of Picasso. Well, Picasso is classically trained in hardcore representational art. He's best known in popular culture for his more abstract art. Let's see, Piet Mondrian is another one that even if you don't know the name, the paintings of just red and yellow with black lines. Everything's just lines and rectangles and squares. That's one of the ones, famously, most art students go, I could do that. Well, he took multiple years abstracting his work to get to that point. He worked highly representational and moved toward abstraction in that. There's just back to Picasso briefly. There's a well-known series of lithographs that Picasso did of a bull. I think there's like 12 of them in the series, where he took one image of a bull, started out very representational, and by the end it was just a few lines and shapes, and he abstracts it along the way. So there's a few artists. Boy, I had another one in mind and I can't remember right now. So I've probably done that in a little bit different way, not as direct as those two examples, but yeah, there's some stuff out there. Mrs. L says, thank you. It's nice to know there's at least one person who is interested in Krampus. Will Krampus be visiting you on the 5th of? I hope so. I definitely hope so. I should have brought my Krampus mask to show folks. The question is, will Krampus be visiting you? All right. Well, thanks again for showing up. And listening to me. I hope it wasn't too wildly disorganized, lost trains of thought. Most of these things I could talk about for far longer and in far more detail. So if any questions come up, don't hesitate to contact me. All right, I'm going to sign off.